Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randirhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Look, we have a tragedy. We're going to do, and what happened in Las Vegas is in many ways a miracle. The police department
It's a miracle, everybody.
has done such an incredible job. And we'll be talking about gun laws as time goes by. But I do have to say, how quickly the police department was able to get in was really very much of a miracle. They've done an amazing job. Go ahead, John.
The silencer bill.
We'll talk about that later.
Where do you come down on the silencer bill? We'll talk about that later. It's never a good time, everybody. It's never a good time. It's not a good time for blacks to protest. It's not a good time for us to talk about, automatic, semi-automatic, weapons of war. It's not time for us to talk about regulating guns. It's not time for us to talk about mental illness. It's not time. It's never going to be time. It's just never going to be time. It's a very sick thing that $30 million could buy you no time. Actually, no time to talk about gun regulation, none whatsoever. How many? And of course, it's going to happen again and again. It's going to happen, more and more. It's going to happen over and over. And the people in this country deserve the freedom and the liberty to go to a movie. They deserve the freedom to go to a club. They deserve the freedom to go to a concert. And it doesn't matter what affiliation the person who shoots you is once you're dead, does it? No. If you've lost your mother, if you've lost your sister, if you've lost your son or daughter, if you've lost your grandma, if you've lost a friend, does it matter what the reason the shooter had in his crazy head to shoot 527 people and kill 59 and put 12 people in critical care that we don't even know, if the number's going to go up or not? I got to tell you something. This is an amazing little clip that, that I know about the history of this country, okay? And I know what a well-regulated militia requires of the militia members. You have to muster. You have to have your weapons inspected. Depending on your rank, you carried an axe or you carried a musket. And you had to have your powder kept in a certain way. It was never intended for people to have AK-47s or AR-15s or silencers on there. That's not what this was about. That's not what the Second Amendment is about. You've got the militia acts. You can go back and read them and the laws that they had. Okay, here. I'll just read you the muster laws. There's so many shalls in this law. Okay, it's amazing. It says. Forming the citizen, this is Virginia, forming the citizens of this Commonwealth into a militia and disciplining the same for deference thereof, be it enacted by the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Virginia that all free male persons, there's the problem right there, but okay, all free persons hired servants and apprentices between the ages of 16 and 50, which means some of you old codgers out there, you're not even eligible. This guy, by virtue of his age, would not be eligible. The guy who shot Steve Scalise would not be eligible to have a weapon at home because he couldn't qualify to be part of the militia. All right. So then they exempt a whole bunch of people, right? The governor at the College of William and Mary, the Academy of Hampden, Sydney, postmasters, people who work in the public jails. They didn't have to do this, okay? But everybody else shall, not may, shall, by the commanding officer of the county in which they reside, be enrolled and formed into companies of not less than 32, nor more than 68 rank and file, and these companies shall again be formed into battalions of not more than 1,000, nor less than 500 men, if there be so many in the county. The free mulattoes. Oh, hey. Hi, how are you doing, free mulatto?
I get a chance to fight, Randy?
Okay. Well, you get to be a drummer.
So it's back to the rhythm thing here.
Yeah. The rhythm thing. Yeah. Because it says here in this piece of legislation, the free mulattoes in the said companies or battalions shall be employed as drummers, fifers, or pioneers. I don't know what that means. I guess you get to have a cooking show where you sell your own pots and pans and dishware. Each company shall be commanded by a captain, 2 lieutenants, and an ensign. Each battalion will be commanded by a colonel, lieutenant colonel, and a major, who shall take precedence and command of each other according to rank and seniority, and the whole by a county lieutenant shall be resident of their county, and before they enter on the execution of their office, shall be in presence of a court of the same county take the following oath. I do swear that I will be faithful and true to the Commonwealth of Virginia, of which I profess myself to be a citizen, and that I will faithfully and justly execute the office of the militia of the county according to the best of my skill and judgment, so help me God. There shall be private muster of every company once every month, except in December and January. And the commanding officer shall appoint and a general muster in each county at the courthouse on a convenient day in the months of April and October to be appointed by the county lieutenant. I mean, this goes on for 10 pages. 10 pages to regulate and discipline the militia. I don't think anybody in this country has ever taken an oath unless they're in the National Guard, which is now the militia. The states have a standing army. The states have a state National Guard. That is the militia. And you are called to muster probably once a month, just like it says there. And then you have to go and be trained, for a weekend? No, it's a weekend a month. I forget. I was in the reserves. It was a weekend a month and then 3 weeks every year or some such thing. Yeah, so that's your militia, people. And if you're not involved in that, then you're not in the militia. I don't understand what the confusion is. But okay, I went off on a little tangent there because I want you to understand that I understand what a well-regulated and disciplined militia is, how it's formed, who's in it, what they do, and there's an oath required, okay? An oath. And there's punishment for failure to show up, too. I could go through all these 10 pages. And the same is true if you are in the National Guard or serving in the reserves of the United States in your state. Okay? The same is true. If you don't show up, you better have a reason of illness or you're going to be court-martialed. And it's that exact language, court-martial, that is in these militia acts that organize militias. All right, that said, the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court between 1969 and 1986 was Justice Warren Burger. I'm going to play you what he said about the NRA and the Second Amendment of the Constitution.
If I were writing the Bill of Rights now, there wouldn't be any such thing as the Second Amendment.
Which says?
That a well-regulated militia being necessary for the defense of the state, the people's rights to bear arms. This has been the subject of one of the greatest pieces of fraud, I repeat the word fraud, on the American public by special interest groups that I have ever seen in my lifetime. Now just look at those words. There are only 3 lines to that amendment. A well-regulated militia. If the militia, which was going to be the state army, was going to be well-regulated, why shouldn't 16 and 17 and 18 or any other age persons be regulated in the use of arms the way an automobile is regulated?
Here's another point that Justice Burger could have made and should have made, and maybe he did make in that appearance on McNeil Lehrer back in 1991. But we do have a state militia that is well regulated, and that is the State National Guard. The president can federalize the National Guard. Otherwise, the state militia, the State National Guard, is commanded by the governor of the state, just like it was outlined in the Militia Act. Just like that. Now, it is a subject of intense fraud, the NRA's existence. It is one of the most fraudulent efforts in lobbying Congress that has ever taken place in the history of the United States. And it's killing people. 527 wounded, 59 dead, and maybe, and 12 people hanging on in critical condition to this minute. It's killing people. 5 people in Lawrence, Kansas, except that didn't really show up on the radar screen because it was overshadowed just by the sheer numbers of dead in Las Vegas. We had 6 and 7-year-olds killed in Newtown, Connecticut. We had Aurora's movie theater shot up by a mentally deranged young guy. We had high schools shot up in Columbine by 2 crazy, mentally ill guys who wanted, to make a place in history for their names. I mean, this is just, it is killing us. It is literally killing us. And it is avoiding the issue of whose freedom does the Constitution stand and who is to be protected under the Constitution. When they say that it exists for the protection of life, liberty, do they mean your life? Do they mean your liberty to move about this country without fear? Does it mean your ability to go to a movie when you want? Does it mean your ability to go to a concert when you? No, they seem to think it means that a special interest group that lobbies on behalf of manufacturers that manufacture tools of war for domestic consumption in the United States is more important than you. It's so on its ass. It's so on its head. It makes absolutely no sense. And I will say that we lived in this country for a very long time with the Supreme Court making interpretations of the lax gun laws that Congress passes. Okay? The decision that guided us for a really long time was the Miller decision that was decided in 1939 that banned sawed-off shotguns. And in the Miller decision, the Supreme Court held that the Second Amendment doesn't give you the right to own any damn thing that you want, that you would find in gangs or that you would find in military use. They said it had absolutely nothing to do with that. It was not about a person's right. It was about a well-regulated militia being necessary. Then that militia would be regulated well. And so for a really long time, federal judges uniformly understood that the right protected by the Second Amendment was limited. It was limited. It applied only to keeping and bearing arms for military purposes. It limited the power of the federal government, but it did not impose a limit on what the state could do to protect itself from the federal government so that it could have a National Guard. That was the law we understood. That was the law every justice understood. That was the way we operated in this country. That was the guiding principle of the Second Amendment, and everyone understood it. And, you got to remember that, back in the day, in the 1700s, in the 1800s, in the 1900s, they were closer to the formation than we are now in the 21st century. So, this is just all fraud. This is a fraud perpetrated on the American people by a special interest group. This man said he would drain the swamp. He said he would end the carnage. He's done neither. The swamp is swampier than ever. People can't even stay in his cabinet because they get exposed as being swamp monsters. And the carnage has exponentially increased. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.